And joining us right now is former Giuliani presidential campaign aide Evan Siegfried and political commentator and attorney Danielle McLaughlin. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Let's talk about from your days with Giuliani, as you see a move like this, Trump bringing in the big gun Manafort and shaking up his campaign. What does that tell you? That
tells me that Corey Lewandowski is falling out of favor because of everything that's happened. Trump did not do what he needed to do in the summer and early fall of organizing and really building a campaign to go the distance. And now he's playing catch-up by hiring Manafort. Danielle, what do you think about that?
I tend to agree. I think New York is probably inevitable for Trump, but I do see that the lack of a ground game, the lack of organization is going to be problematic for him going forward.
And interesting that he makes this change day and going into such an important contest that is New York.
And does it signal that the campaign is acknowledging that they're not going to get to 1237 before the convention, that the math increasingly is against him? He needs to get close to 70% of the remaining bound delegates to reach that level. And New York, there's so much focus on New York, and I get that and I know that, but if you look at other contests, it's much closer. And he needs to get to that 50% mark in the congressional districts in New York, but in Pennsylvania, we talked about this yesterday, it's a much tighter race. Even if you look at California, he's got 36% of the vote right now in the Real Clear Politics average. Cruz is working on California, and he's at 28% right now. Yeah. So it's much closer.
Yeah. I agree, and I think Wisconsin was really a problem for Donald Trump. He got so few delegates, and that people have talked about a tipping point or other things, and the march gets harder and harder and harder for him as we get closer.
What's your take on the others? John Kasich, Ted Cruz?
Well, in New York particularly, it looks like Kasich will come a distant second and Cruz will come a distant third. Not surprising. Trump has an enormous amount of support on Long Island, in the Rust Belt, and certainly in the New York City area and Long Island area. They're close to almost all of the delegates are from that because of the enormous amounts of population.
It also doesn't help that Ted Cruz went out and he opposed Sedroga and Sandy Aide. And for New Yorkers, even New York Republicans, that does not sit well. He's never had a good relationship with New York.
I agree.
Well, I think the campaign is still not addressing one of the biggest challenges, which is his problem with women voters. I mean, I said, someone on Fox asked me a few days ago what he could do for women, and I said, I think he should have some women at the top of the campaign, some strategists, something. I mean, Ivanka's great. She goes on television. She's fabulous.
She is a secret weapon.
She's great, but I think he's going to need a bit more than that because his numbers with women are right.
If you look at his statement Tuesday night after Wisconsin, he basically said, he accused Ted Cruz of being a Trojan horse and coordinating an illegal campaign activity. He had the perfect opportunity to show that he can be presidential as he claims he can be. He could have come out and given a nice concession speech and everybody would have said, well, wait a second, this is a new side of Donald Trump. Instead, it showed this unhinged side that does not bring in swing voters and last-minute deciding voters
either. There was a poll yesterday that found that 7 out of 10 Americans don't like him, that he has an unfavorable...
7 out of 10.
69%, and it's gotten worse. It was 58% in mid-February, now 69%. Now, Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton, people aren't actually falling all over themselves and, rosy-cheeked in love with them either, but it's 59% unfavorable for Cruz and 55% unfavorable for Hillary.
Wow, there are a lot of high negatives there.
And to your point, people have talked about a ceiling for Donald Trump for a really long time. I've always considered it to be unfavorability. This idea that there are people who are really, really for him, and then there are people who are really, really against him. Certainly Hillary Clinton has her own issues with favorable, unfavorable numbers, but these numbers we've not seen in a leading presidential candidate, I'm not sure ever.
Yeah, you're right. It's pretty extraordinary. What about Bill Clinton? I mean, we got to get into this heated exchange that he had with Black Lives Matter protesters in Philadelphia yesterday. I'm going to get your reaction. He said they are defending murderers and drug dealers. Watch.
I don't know how you would characterize the gang leaders who got 13-year-old kids hopped up on crack and sent them out onto the street to murder other African-American children. Maybe you thought they were good citizens. She didn't. She didn't. You are defending the people who kill the lives you say matter. Tell the truth.
Wow, this is interesting, Danielle. This is obviously a group that the Clinton campaign has had trouble with, but also Bill Clinton was so popular with the African-American community.
It's strange in a way because, as you say, both he and Hillary have really strong support in the African-American community. There are all of these vestiges from Clinton's presidency with the crime bill and other things, and certainly within that period where we saw very different sentences for different kinds of drugs that disparately impacted African-American community. So it's interesting to me that there is this sort of a love-hate relationship with that community between the Clintons. I'm not sure that this gets resolved anytime soon, but they're aware of it, no question. And Hillary continues to poll well in it.
It's not that she's just doing well with African Americans. They've saved her in this nomination process. I mean, African Americans, especially the older generation, are voting for her in some of the primaries at like 70%. So if she did not have the African American support, this primary would be much more aggressively with Bernie Sanders than with her. They totally saved her.
The couple of the Black Lives Matter protesters disrupted a private fundraiser that she was doing down in South Carolina some time ago. And it's related to a number of things. It's the 94 crime bill that you were talking about, the Violent Crime Control and Prevention Act, which the protesters say was disproportionate against black men. But it's also some language that she's used in the past, super predator, and also she said in reference to people at risk, young people, this is back in the mid-90s, but she said we have to bring them to heel. So it's interesting that they're going back deep into the 90s and using that against them, and repeatedly on this campaign
trail. Why would they be doing that, Dagan?
I think it gets them attention. And again, it's easy. It gets them more attention, I think, than if you go after Hillary and Bill Clinton than if you go after a Donald Trump, because a Donald Trump throws it off.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see Bill, the president, get so upset.
Yeah.